When did your partner realize they had you all wrong? I paid all the rent and did all the chores, and my boyfriend still pre-peeled bananas for me because he thought the peels were too tricky for women. Roy came from a traditional man as leader, woman as dumb household, and always looked at me like I was an incapable bimbo who sat around all day just looking pretty. He'd regularly work the microwave for me because I couldn't possibly know how to, and checked my gas tank every day to make sure I didn't forget to top my car up. While out of the house, he'd call me every hour to make sure I didn't accidentally burn the house down. Last month, Roy got invited to TwitchCon as a rising streamer with his 50 followers. He spent weeks explaining to me what a convention was. It's like a big meeting with lots of people. You'll need to stay close to me so you don't get lost, okay? He actually packed fruit shoots in my purse instead of water like I asked. At the event, he introduced me to every single person the same way. This is my girlfriend. She doesn't understand anything, but she's here. Not my name, not once. When another streamer asked what I did, Roy laughed and rubbed my back. She's working on finding herself. Aren't you, babe? I nodded and smiled. Not the least bit surprised Roy didn't remember me telling him about my skincare brand taking off. During a panel about monetization, I quietly mentioned affiliate marketing. Roy actually shushed me, in front of 200 people. Sorry guys, she watches a lot of YouTube. She thinks she knows about this stuff. The panel host looked uncomfortable. Roy continued, "It's cute though. She tries so hard to understand my work. Don't you, sweetie?" At the after party, a group was discussing algorithm changes. I started to comment on engagement metrics when Roy interrupted. "Babe, why don't you go get us drinks? This is pretty complicated stuff. Too many numbers." He handed me his credit card like I was a child. "Remember, beer for me. Something pink and sparkly for you. Ask the bartender for something sweet, okay?" While waiting at the bar, I heard him at the table. She means well, but honestly, trying to explain streaming to her is like teaching my dog calculus. Yesterday, she asked me what a subscriber was. We've been dating 2 years. They laughed. But hey, she's hot and she supports my dream, even if she doesn't understand it. She thinks I'm like a TV star or something. When his friend asked how we split bills, Roy got serious. "I handle all the finances. She tried to help once but accidentally paid our rent twice. Can't trust her with important stuff. I even have to write her grocery list with pictures or she'll come back with just candy. Last week she cried because she couldn't figure out how to use the can opener." His friend mentioned his girlfriend was stressed about her period. Roy jumped in. "Oh man, my girlfriend turns into a complete baby. I have to track her cycle on my phone because she can't figure out the apps. She doesn't even understand how tampons work properly. I have to buy them for her because she gets confused by all the sizes." I came back with the drinks. Roy took his beer and patted the seat next to him. "Come sit, babe. We're talking about grown-up stuff, but you can listen." That's when a woman at the next table turned around, eyes wide. "Oh my god, are you the founder of Glow Beauty?" Roy laughed so hard he spit out his beer. "Her? No. She doesn't even have a job. You're confused." The woman stood up, pulling out her phone. "No, you're literally on my bathroom counter. I use your vitamin C serum every day. You're the CEO who just got featured in a magazine." She showed her phone to the table. My face next to the headline, 25-year-old builds $1 million skincare brand. My boyfriend snapped his head around. "You do what?" I stared at him. "I take everything back, babe. Please." I stared at him, wondering if I should humiliate him here, or wait just a little longer. The silence stretched out while everyone at the table stared at the phone screen showing my face next to that headline. I counted to 10 in my head, watching Roy's mouth open and close like a fish trying to breathe. Then I put on my sweetest smile and pushed my chair back from the table. "I need to use the bathroom." The woman who'd recognized me caught my eye as I walked past her table and she mouthed the word sorry with this guilty look on her face. I gave her a quick thumbs up behind my back where Roy couldn't see it. The bathroom was down a long hallway past the main bar area and I could feel eyes on me the whole way there. Word was already spreading through the crowd about what just happened. Inside the bathroom, I locked myself in a stall and pulled out my phone to text Rhonda a quick update about the whole thing blowing up at the after party. My phone started ringing before I even finished typing. Rhonda had been waiting for this moment just as long as I had. Maybe longer since she'd watched Roy talk down to me at every company event we'd ever invited him to. "Stay calm and think about your next move," she said after I gave her the quick version. "You've got all the power here now." She was right, of course. I splashed cold water on my face and checked my makeup in the mirror before heading back out. The walk back to the table felt different this time. People were looking at me with recognition instead of just seeing Roy's arm candy. When I got back to the table, Roy had already shifted into full damage control mode with his friends. He was leaning forward with his hands spread out on the table, talking fast. "She must have been keeping this whole thing secret to test if I really loved her for who she is," he was saying. His friends looked super uncomfortable, shifting in their seats and avoiding eye contact with each other. One guy was picking at the label on his beer bottle while another kept checking his phone like he wanted to be anywhere else. I sat back down in my chair and folded my hands on the table. "I've been running Glow Beauty for 3 years, I said calmly. "Started it 6 months after we started dating, and yes, I've been paying our rent with the profits from my company this whole time." Roy's face went through about 6 different shades of red, while his friends exchanged these meaningful looks across the table. The guy with the beer bottle actually scooted his chair back a little bit like he wanted to create distance from the whole situation. One of his friends, the one who'd been checking his phone, finally looked up and asked why I never mentioned it if it was such a big deal. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my text messages with Roy. Every time I tried to talk about work, he'd pat my head and change the subject. I explained, turning the screen so they could see. There were screenshots of me telling Roy about new product launches and him responding with, "That's nice, sweetie," followed by gaming memes. One text from 3 months ago showed me telling him about a major retail opportunity and him sending back a gif of a cartoon character playing video games. Roy reached across the table trying to grab my hand, but I pulled back before he could touch me. "We need to talk about this privately," I said. His friends suddenly remembered they had other places to be, mumbling about early panels tomorrow and needing to check out other parties. Within 2 minutes, they'd all cleared out and we were alone at the table. The woman who'd recognized me gave me an encouraging nod from across the room where she was sitting with her own group. Roy immediately launched into this whole speech about how hurt he was that I'd lied to him for so long. "You made me look like an idiot in front of everyone," he said, trying to flip the whole thing around so I was the bad guy. I reminded him that just 5 minutes ago he was telling his friends I couldn't figure out how to use a can opener. He waved his hand dismissively and said he was just joking around, that his friends knew he didn't really mean it. "I'm done with this relationship," I told him. "I'll be moving out tomorrow." His whole body went rigid and he started panicking, making all these promises about how he'd change and how he really did respect successful women. "My mom is super successful too," he added desperately, even though I knew for a fact his mom hadn't worked a day in the last 20 years. The convention weekend kept going after that scene at the after-party, and word spread through the attendees faster than any viral tweet. The next morning at the coffee stand, 3 different female streamers came up to me while I was waiting for my latte. Each one had their own story about boyfriends who treated them like idiots, even though they were the ones actually making money from streaming. One girl showed me her analytics showing she had 10 times more followers than her boyfriend, but he still explained streaming basics to her every day. Another told me her boyfriend took credit for her channel growth at every opportunity. Throughout the day, more women approached me at panels and in the vendor hall, sharing stories about partners who couldn't handle their success. Meanwhile, my phone kept buzzing nonstop with texts from Roy. First came the apologies, these long messages about how sorry he was and how he'd never meant to make me feel small. Then came the accusations that I'd humiliated him on purpose, that I'd planned the whole reveal to embarrass him in front of his friends. Then he started demanding that I take down any social media posts about my company because it was making him look bad. The funny thing was, I hadn't posted anything yet, but his paranoia was showing through every message. He even sent me screenshots of his Twitter mentions where people were calling him out, like somehow that was my fault too. Sunday night when I got back to our apartment, the smell of roses hit me before I even opened the door. Roy had bought 3 dozen red roses and put them in every vase we owned plus some coffee mugs. The whole place was spotless for the first time since we'd moved in together. He'd even mopped the floors and cleaned the bathroom, tasks he'd always said were too complicated for him to learn properly. Dinner was already on the table with candles lit and soft music playing from his gaming speakers. He pulled out my chair and poured wine into the fancy glasses we never used. "We need to talk about our future together now that we're both successful," he said, sitting across from me with this hopeful look on his face. I didn't touch the food and started packing my stuff instead, grabbing boxes from the closet while he followed me from room to room. He kept talking about how he'd been my biggest supporter all along, how his stable presence let me focus on building my business. "I gave you the security you needed to take risks," he said while I wrapped my coffee mugs in newspaper. He actually tried to take credit for my success, saying his gaming career inspired me to start my own business. I reminded him that I'd been paying all our bills for 2 years, but he just waved that away like it was a minor detail. The next morning, Rhonda showed up with her boyfriend and a rental truck while Roy was in the middle of streaming. He tried to keep talking to his viewers about some new game while we carried boxes past his computer setup. His chat kept asking what was happening in the background, and he had to mute his mic every few minutes to beg me to wait until after his stream. We just kept loading boxes while he struggled to maintain his fake, cheerful streaming voice. My phone rang while I was packing up the bathroom and Roy's mom's name popped up on the screen. Diane launched straight into this lecture about loyalty and supporting your man through tough times. "Roy tells me you're leaving him right when you got successful," she said, her voice sharp with disapproval. She went on about how relationships require sacrifice and compromise, clearly not understanding what had actually been happening for the past 2 years. I started listing specific examples of how Roy had treated me, like the banana peeling and the microwave incidents. She laughed at each one and called them sweet gestures of protection. "Boys will be boys," she said when I told her about the can opener story. "You should be grateful he cared enough to help you so much." Then Harvey got on the phone and his voice was even more dismissive than his wife's. "You're making a huge mistake leaving a good provider like Roy," he said firmly. I told him I'd been the sole provider for our entire relationship, paying rent and bills while Roy played video games. He literally didn't believe me until I offered to email him 2 years of bank statements, showing every payment coming from my account. The moving process dragged on all day because Roy kept trying to claim things that were obviously mine. He grabbed boxes of Glow Beauty products from my inventory and insisted they belonged to both of us. "I protected you while you built this company, so I own half of it," he said, holding a box of vitamin C serums. He tried to keep my laptop, my ring light for product photos, even the label printer I used for shipping. Every item turned into an argument about who really owned what. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer friend who'd heard about the breakup through social media. She warned me about protecting my assets and mentioned Roy might try to claim common law marriage rights to get money from my business. I texted back that California doesn't recognize common law marriage and everything was already in my name anyway. She sent me links to document everything just in case he tried something stupid later. That evening, I crashed at Rhonda's place and we ordered Chinese food while going through my overflowing email inbox. 3 major beauty influencers had reached out after hearing about the TwitchCon reveal, each one wanting to feature Glow Beauty on their channels. One had 2 million followers and wanted to do a full brand review next week. Another wanted to include my products in her monthly favorites video. The third one offered to create a dedicated discount code for her audience. While we were eating orange chicken and answering emails, Roy posted this long Twitter thread about being blindsided by his girlfriend's secret life. He wrote 10 tweets about how hurt and betrayed he felt by my deception, making himself sound like the victim of some elaborate con. He talked about how he'd supported me through everything, and this was how I repaid his love and dedication. He left out every single part about treating me like an incompetent child for 2 years, about the fruit shoots in my purse, about explaining what tampons were for. His followers started replying with sympathy and calling me a gold digger who'd used him until I made it big. The whole thread was this masterpiece of selective memory and creative storytelling that made him look like a devoted boyfriend who'd been played by a manipulative woman. Within minutes, the replies started flooding in, and they were brutal. Women started posting screenshots of Roy sliding into their DMs while we were together. Messages where he called me slow and said I'd never notice if he cheated. One girl posted a whole conversation where Roy told her I was too dumb to check his phone and offered to meet up after I went to bed. Another woman shared texts where he complained about having to explain everything to me twice and said he was looking for someone smarter. The screenshots kept coming, and each one showed Roy talking about me like I was some kind of pet he kept around for looks. Rhonda read them out loud while I scrolled through my business emails, and we both kept shaking our heads at how many women he'd been messaging. My phone buzzed with a new email from someone named Tristan Pike at a major beauty retailer, and my heart started racing when I saw the subject line about a distribution opportunity. He wanted to discuss carrying Glow Beauty products in their 200 stores nationwide and mentioned potential orders in the mid-6 figures. This was the chance I'd been working toward for 3 years, the kind of deal that would change everything for my company. I called him back right away and he answered on the first ring, treating me like the CEO I actually was instead of some confused child. We scheduled a meeting for the next day at an upscale restaurant downtown to discuss terms, and I could barely contain my excitement. The next morning, I put on my best business outfit and drove to the restaurant where Tristan was already waiting with a folder full of contracts and projections. He stood up when I arrived and shook my hand firmly, asking smart questions about my supply chain and manufacturing capacity. We went through spreadsheets over appetizers, and he never once talked down to me or explained basic business concepts like I was 5 years old. The contrast between this professional respect and Roy's treatment hit me so hard that I actually teared up while cutting into my salmon. Tristan pretended not to notice and kept talking about shelf placement and marketing support while I pulled myself together. We shook hands on a preliminary deal worth $800,000, and I walked out of that restaurant feeling like a real business owner for the first time. 3 days later, Rhonda texted me that Roy was downstairs with security, trying to get up to her apartment with what looked like a poster board. Security wouldn't let him pass the lobby, but he stood there for an hour holding up this printed PowerPoint presentation toward the security cameras. He started texting me photos of his slides, which included a pie chart of his projected emotional growth over the next 6 months. One slide had a graph showing his respect for women increasing by 20% each quarter. Another slide listed 10 reasons we should get back together with clip art hearts next to each bullet point. The final slide was a photo of us from last year with the words, "Power Couple," written in Comic Sans font across the top. I deleted the text without responding and went back to answering emails from beauty influencers wanting to review my products. A journalist from a major business magazine reached out that same week about doing a feature on young female founders in the beauty industry. She'd heard about my story through the business community and wanted to interview me about building Glow Beauty from scratch. I agreed, but told her I wanted to focus on the business journey rather than any personal drama or relationship stuff. We met at a coffee shop near my office, and she asked thoughtful questions about product development and customer acquisition. When she asked about challenges I'd faced as a young female founder, I mentioned being underestimated constantly without naming names. She pressed for specific examples, so I told her about the TwitchCon panel incident, where I was shushed in front of 200 people. I didn't say Roy's name, but anyone who was there would know exactly who I meant. She took notes rapidly and asked follow-up questions about how that kind of treatment affected my business decisions. Meanwhile, Roy's streaming numbers started climbing from all the drama and attention. He went from 50 followers to almost 200 in a week, and started calling himself a relationship coach on his channel. He'd stream for hours giving advice to his mostly male audience about how to spot deceptive women and protect themselves from gold diggers. Rhonda watched one of his streams and texted me clips where he was explaining red flags like women who were too smart or successful. He actually made a whole presentation about how successful women were usually hiding something and couldn't be trusted. His viewers ate it up and started donating money while sharing their own stories about evil ex-girlfriends. I spent that week looking at apartments and finally found a beautiful one-bedroom in Pacific Heights with huge windows and hardwood floors. The property manager recognized me when I walked in and started gushing about how she used my vitamin C serum every morning. I signed the lease using my business credit for the first time, and she offered to put Glow Beauty samples in all the resident welcome packages. The apartment had a real home office with built-in shelves where I could run meetings without pretending to be confused by technology. I moved in the following weekend and set up my desk facing the window with a view of the whole city. My first all-hands meeting from the new office felt incredible, with my team finally seeing my real personality after meeting Roy at last year's holiday party. They joked about how different I seemed, and one person mentioned they'd wondered why I always acted so confused about basic business concepts when Roy was around. We laughed about it, but I could tell they were relieved to see the real me running things. 2 weeks after moving in, I got an email from Roy with the subject line, "Business Proposal Confidential." He'd attached a formal contract suggesting we become a power couple brand where he'd stream using my products for his audience. The contract gave him 50% of any joint ventures, even though he was only bringing 200 followers to the table. He'd included projections showing how his gaming audience would definitely buy skincare products if he recommended them. The final page had a section about image rights where he'd own half of any content we created together, including my product photos from before we met. I sent the contract straight to my lawyer friend, who texted back 3 laughing emojis and said she'd frame it as an example of delusional thinking. The next morning, my phone started buzzing nonstop with notifications from Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitter all at once. The magazine article had dropped online overnight, and the quote about building an empire while my boyfriend thought I couldn't work a microwave had gone viral in business circles. My DMs filled up with messages from other female founders sharing their own stories about partners who underestimated them. One woman wrote about her husband who thought she was playing games on her laptop when she was actually coding her startup that later sold for millions. Another told me about her ex who tried to explain her own PhD thesis to her at a dinner party. I spent the morning reading through hundreds of these messages and feeling less alone than I had in years. My phone rang while I was making coffee and Harvey's name popped up on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. He started talking immediately about how proud he was of my success and how he always knew I was special. Then he got to his real point and asked if I could hire Roy as a brand ambassador for Glow Beauty since I was doing so well. He actually said Roy could provide the male perspective my female-focused brand was missing. I told him I'd think about it and hung up while he was still talking about Roy's marketing potential. 3 days later, I was at Whole Foods picking up groceries when I spotted a familiar figure struggling at the self-checkout station. Roy was standing there holding a single apple and staring at the screen like it was written in another language. The machine kept beeping at him and a line was forming behind him. I walked over and pressed the produce button, then showed him how to find apples on the menu. He looked up at me with this weird mix of embarrassment and gratitude on his face. Neither of us said anything about the irony of me helping him with basic technology. He thanked me quietly and I started walking toward the parking lot, but he followed me outside. At my car, he finally started talking and said he was sorry for everything. His voice actually cracked a little when he admitted his parents had messed him up with their whole dynamic. He told me he'd started seeing a therapist who was helping him understand his patterns. But then he had to add that I still should have told him about the company sooner. I just nodded and got in my car while he stood there looking lost in the parking lot. Back at the office, Rhonda showed me the sales numbers from the past week, and we'd spiked 300% since the article came out. Orders were pouring in faster than our small team could handle them. We needed to hire at least 5 more people immediately just to keep up with fulfillment. Rhonda suggested we specifically look for women who'd been underestimated in their careers and turn our experience into opportunity for others. I loved the idea, and we posted job listings that afternoon, emphasizing we valued potential over traditional credentials. Within hours, we had dozens of applications from women with stories similar to mine. Over the next few days, Roy's friends started reaching out one by one to apologize for not speaking up when he was being condescending at TwitchCon. 2 of them admitted their girlfriends had threatened to dump them if they didn't recognize their own similar behaviors. One guy wrote a long message about how watching Roy's downfall made him realize he'd been doing the same thing to his wife. They all seemed genuinely sorry, but I couldn't help wondering why none of them said anything when it was actually happening. The following week, Tristan from the major beauty retailer called to confirm our distribution deal was approved by his board. Glow Beauty products would be in 200 stores nationwide by the end of the quarter. He asked if I wanted to sign the contracts at his office, but I suggested the coffee shop on Market Street instead. It was the same place where Roy had once spent an hour explaining to me how business worked while I nodded along. I signed the papers at the same table where he'd drawn supply and demand curves on napkins like I was in kindergarten. Tristan treated me like the CEO I was, and we discussed expansion strategies for the next hour. That evening, I got a long email from Diane with the subject line, "You've destroyed my son." She went on for 3 pages about how I'd ruined Roy's confidence and his streaming career was suffering because of me. She claimed his viewers missed the confident guy he used to be and said I should be ashamed of myself. She couldn't see the connection between his confidence and his condescension at all. According to her, I was just a vindictive woman who couldn't handle a strong man. I forwarded it to my lawyer just in case, then deleted it without responding. The next day, I sat down to write a blog post for the Glow Beauty website about imposter syndrome and how sometimes the biggest obstacle to success is the people closest to you. I kept it general without naming anyone, but wrote about how being constantly underestimated can actually make you doubt yourself even when you're succeeding. Within hours of posting, it became our most shared content ever, with thousands of women commenting their own experiences. Meanwhile, I heard through mutual friends that Roy had pivoted his streaming content to self-improvement and was actually reading books about unconscious bias on stream. His audience had shrunk from 200 back down to about 70, but the remaining viewers seemed more genuine. He'd stopped calling women females and was actually engaging with female streamers as equals for the first time. 3 months went by and I got an email from a major business conference asking me to speak about authentic leadership at their event in Vegas next month. The organizer mentioned in her email that they'd originally considered Roy for their gaming panel, but decided against it after seeing his Twitter thread meltdown. I accepted immediately, and spent the next few weeks preparing my presentation, while also managing our expanding team at Glow Beauty. The conference was packed with over 5,000 attendees, and my talk was scheduled for the main stage on day 2. I walked out to face the huge audience wearing my favorite blazer, and started talking about building a company, while being systematically underestimated by the person closest to me. People were taking notes and nodding along as I shared specific examples without naming Roy directly, though anyone who'd seen the viral article would know exactly who I meant. After my talk, a venture capitalist named Sarah Chen approached me backstage and handed me her business card while telling me she'd been following my story since the magazine feature. She wanted to discuss potential funding for Glow Beauty's international expansion, and suggested we meet for lunch the next day to go over details. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Roy congratulating me on the conference talk which he'd apparently watched online. He said he was proud of me with no buts or qualifiers attached, which was literally the first time he'd ever said anything supportive about my work, without adding some kind of dig. It felt weird, but also like some kind of closure after everything that had happened between us. 6 months passed and Glow Beauty hit $10 million in revenue, which meant we qualified for the Forbes 30 Under 30 list that I'd been secretly hoping for since starting the company. The photo shoot happened in our new office space, which had an entire wall displaying our product line and absolutely zero video game posters anywhere. I hired a full executive team, including a CFO named Margaret, who laughed out loud when I told her during the interview that my ex used to think I couldn't handle our rent payments. She shared her own story about a husband who'd hidden her acceptance letter to business school because he thought she'd get overwhelmed by the coursework. Our head of marketing came from a major beauty brand, and our operations director had built supply chains for 3 other startups before joining us. Through mutual friends, I heard Roy was doing better and had started dating someone his own age who apparently called him out whenever he said something stupid. He'd recently posted on Instagram about respecting his girlfriend's PhD studies in biochemistry and how much he was learning from her research. The post had zero condescending language, and he'd actually used her full name and title when mentioning her work, which was a huge improvement from how he used to introduce me as just my girlfriend. Our company's 1-year retail anniversary arrived, and Tristan organized a huge party at a hotel ballroom with all our retail partners and team members attending. I stood at the podium looking out at 200 people who'd helped make Glow Beauty successful and gave a speech thanking everyone who'd believed in me from the start. I also thanked the people who hadn't believed in me because their doubt had pushed me to work harder and prove them wrong, though I wouldn't recommend that path to anyone else. The crowd applauded, and Rhonda raised her champagne glass from the front row with tears in her eyes. Life had gotten genuinely good over the past year, with the company growing faster than we'd ever imagined, and a new relationship with someone who treated me like an actual equal partner. His name was David, and he ran his own tech startup, so he understood the demands of building a business and never once suggested I needed help with basic tasks. We'd met at a founders meetup where he'd asked intelligent questions about our supply chain and distribution strategy instead of assuming I was someone's assistant. Even Roy seemed to have grown from our whole experience based on what I saw online, though we'd never be friends or even speak again, really. The last I heard, he'd started a podcast about unlearning toxic masculinity and actually had decent guests who challenged him on his past behavior. His streaming numbers stayed small, but his content had shifted completely away from the bro culture stuff he used to promote. Thanks for hanging out with me through all this wondering and questioning. Really means a lot. I'll catch you next time, wherever curiosity takes us. Like the video? It helps more than you think.